Welcome, everybody. My name's Dan Gleason. I'm head of the upper school here at KO. I'm delighted to kick off this portion of the evening. As you know, we're in our 40th year, as you've heard. I want to thank a few people before we begin. So there's a little bit of a laundry list here, so you can hold the applause and we'll applaud them all together. First, Sage Dining and Brian for the awesome meal. Kathy Shefflin, English Department Chair, who organized and collaborated on so many of the logistics and had her very nuanced food analysis. Bill Martino, the symposium teacher this year, who led the charge to bring Tayari Jones here. KO English teachers who each brought a Tayari Jones novel or a major portion of it into their classes this fall, no matter the grade or the course. And of course, Tayari Jones herself, who has been wonderful throughout the process. Let's give everyone involved a huge thank you. So a quick word about process. I'm going to introduce Bill, and Bill is going to introduce Tayari Jones. So let me focus just for a moment on Bill Martino. I'd like to share a few things about him that you may not know, and that put his experience with Symposium into clearer focus. Bill is in his 5th year at KO, and this is his first time teaching Symposium. Like Tayari Jones, who is closely associated with Atlanta, Bill has spent much time thinking about the power of place. A native of Waterbury, Connecticut, Bill went to New York City for college at Fordham and spent 10 years teaching in the city at Xavier High School. While other places have certainly made their marks on him, for example, he spent 2 years in Alabama and 2 years in Savannah, Georgia, teaching middle school English. And at Xavier, he led student trips abroad to France, Italy, and Spain. No place has had the impact on him as New York City has. He's starting to laugh. He knows something's coming. He spent most of his formative adult years there. He walked its streets, debated its best pizza places, memorized its subway lines. He even rode his bike fearlessly through the city, right down Fifth Avenue, with his young daughter, Lizzie, on the back. While at Xavier High School, he collaborated with fellow English teachers to design a senior class, Literature of New York, that put key texts in conversation with New York cultural landmarks. And when he moved to Connecticut 5 years ago, he imported this class to KO with much success. In this class, students read James Baldwin, Joan Didion, and Colson Whitehead, among others, and take a field trip down Route 84 and into Manhattan. So Bill is very connected to New York City, and he will let you know that. Last year, his mild New York name dropping was the subject of a successful student parody on stage where they dropped a lot of New York references and meditated on whether or not they were still cool because they live in Connecticut. So that they really pushed him. Another quick aside about Bill and place that I can't neglect to mention is Bill has also laid claim to another third of the tri-state area. His argument is that no Connecticut family knows the Jersey Shore better than his does. And they're all here to represent that, yes. So, sorry, Bill, I had to do that to you. But joking aside, place has meant a huge amount to Bill, and he has paid really close attention to how it has shaped both his teaching and his identity. I suspect that his interest in place is a key part of what drew him to the novels of Tayari Jones. But another key element that I want to mention about Bill as a teacher is his enthusiasm. Last spring, soon after he made the announcement that Ms. Jones would be our wonderful author for the year, he could be found positively gushing about her work, even at times to the point of becoming speechless. He would often sound like this: no, but really, you don't understand. No, you just don't get it. Like, her writing is just, it's just so good. You just got to read it. And then at faculty meetings, he shared some excerpts, and he joyously walked his fellow teachers through the language, taking feedback on favorite phrases and seeking their questions and insights. He could be heard in the hallway offering advice about which text to read next, urging teachers to look into Silver Sparrow, or dropping little breadcrumbs about the end of American marriage. His enthusiasm was infectious. And he brought this enthusiasm and openness into the classroom. Hopefully, Bill will share a few more details about his class, but just a few for now. He embraced the symposium tradition of toasts on Friday, when students make short speeches with drinks and snacks on any tidbit in the reading that captured them. This is an open-ended prompt in search of authentic engagement, and what he elicited was sincere curiosity, or joy, or confusion, or wonder. And this led to great discussion. Student projects were open-ended and based in individual creative talents. There are paintings, a podcast now available on Spotify, an essay on hair. Bill's sincerity and strong engagement with students clearly worked for them. I would like to share, because he would never do this himself, a few snippets of student feedback about his class from recent anonymous surveys. No, these are actually nice. No, these are great. I really love the symposia we do every Friday because they're such a fun way to speak on the books in a new way while presenting them with songs and food. I love the symposium speeches and journals as they provide us with an opportunity to explore something that we are passionate about that we might not necessarily have talked about otherwise. And finally, this is the best one. Yay! Mr. Martino is genuinely one of the best teachers I've ever had. We all love him. So with those ringing words, please join me in welcoming Bill to the stage.
Thanks, Dan. No. You guys don't understand. In fact, I was so terrified to write this speech tonight that I sought the help of ChatGPT. So that's an English teacher joke, if you guys know. So I haven't written any of this. The computers did it. No, I'm kidding. But I do want to add that some of my references to the text will serve as spoiler alerts, so consider yourselves warned. All right, in an effort to spare you the details of my 18-year teaching career, I'll say this. I love what I do. And while it's idealistic to say that my ultimate goal as an English teacher is to instill a more genuine sense of empathy among my students, I believe that the work that I do, that we all do, is critical. And although the paths that we take are not necessarily parallel with those of our students, we, as many of you are as educators, we certainly grow as our students grow, and we learn as our students learn. So you can imagine then just how excited I was to be asked to be this 2022 symposium teacher here at KO. I was granted the opportunity to spend an entire semester delving deep into a living author's body of work, to collaborate with 20 of the most self-motivated, earnest, and opinionated students I have taught in my career, and to finally meet and celebrate an author whose texts would bring such vibrancy into my class. And while my excitement was certainly greater than my trepidation, it goes without saying that serving as the symposium teacher is no small task. Now, the first major hurdle is finding the right symposium author. And I just want to be really clear, I'm going to go off script here a little bit just based on my experience today, as many of you can attest. Like, with Ms. Tayari Jones, Kingswood Oxford has struck gold. Yes. A teacher first, a critic, a travel writer, an essayist, and a multi-award-winning New York Times best-selling novelist, Ms. Tayari Jones has had an indelible impact on me, my students, and the KO community at large. Her works not only entertain and inspire, but they push boundaries and encourage crucial conversations. Citing Toni Morrison and Judy Blume as some of her major influences, Jones demands us, her readers, to be introspective, to be compassionate, and to reject easy answers to difficult questions. It is this nuanced understanding of humanity that captures the complexities that dwell within us all: heartbreak and humor, loss and love, defeat and discovery. Now, perhaps it's her affinity for manual typewriters or her comparison of the writing process to eating a piece of chocolate cake, something to be enjoyed, not simply consumed. Tayari Jones's love for her craft and her readers is undeniable. Her deft writing lures you in with a secret or a revelation. My father, James Witherspoon, is a bigamist. My mother tells lies. You feel chosen reading Tayari Jones, like what she has to say is for you and for you alone. And her novels pay tribute to the modern urban South, a world in which Black Americans defy stereotypes, experience great joy, claim agency, and yet still remain vulnerable to the injustices in our country. From Tasha and Rodney and Octavia in Leaving Atlanta, to Charisse and Dana in Silver Sparrow, to Celestial and Roy and Andre in An American Marriage, the multiple perspectives contained in her novels shed light on our own perceptions of class and race, family marriage, justice and injustice. She has even claimed herself to be generous and fair when developing her characters, and maintains that each person has to have a side and a legitimate point. Even today, while teaching my students, she said, "No story is a story unless it has 2 points of view, at least 2 points of view." And despite the profound and unimaginable circumstances many of her characters endure, there's great humor and delight contained in her works. I'm like queuing up something right now, so bear with me. In An American Marriage, Celestial states that she likes her mimosas like she likes her men. Transparent. Even her references to music act as a playlist for my youth. Prince's I Want to Be Your Lover, Bridge Over Troubled Water, I Just Called to Say I Love You, and my personal favorite that drove my students nuts. How can I just let you walk away? Actually, when they would be like looking at their computer or texting or something, after we read the chapter, if you're familiar with Silver Sparrow, where there's a Sweet 16 party and that song is playing, and Tayari Jones just told me that actually happened to her, I would look at my students and say, "So take a look at me now," when they were not like not looking at me while I was trying to teach. Where did I go? Oh, even today, Miss Jones taught a lesson on perspective using Smokey Robinson's The Tracks of My Tears. Over the past several months, I've had the immense pleasure of seeing my students interact with Jones's work in ways that far exceeded my expectations. It is no small feat to read 4 novels in a semester while simultaneously finishing up college applications, fulfilling co-curricular requirements, and keeping up with their other classes. Yet my seniors still managed to create passion projects showcasing their intellectual curiosity. These included original musical compositions, paintings, op-eds, podcasts, research projects, even a board game. One of my students literally created a board game based on Silver Sparrow called My Two Families Feud. In class, we engaged in meaningful, sometimes animated conversations about some of the more emotionally charged moments in Tayari Jones's books. Rodney's decision to enter the blue sedan in Leaving Atlanta. A blown-out tire and a showdown at a gas station in Silver Sparrow. And Roy's assault on Old Hickey in An American Marriage. Students grappled with these difficult themes and constructed essential questions to guide their reading and unpacked Miss Jones's text. These questions included, what makes a family? How is comparison at the core of self-perception? How are we trapped by the choices that we make, and how do we fight against this? And how are we complicit? And overall, I mean, this class has been nothing short of transformative. I'm almost done. At the end of An American Marriage, Jones includes an essay entitled, This is a Love Story. At the end of the piece, she mentions that Celestial, Roy, and Andre are, quote, at a crossroads, and like every human being on earth, they must walk their paths, heart first. Jones's interactions with our KO students could not be more in line with that sentiment. Both in the middle school and the upper school, she encouraged our young wyverns to follow their hearts and listen to every person's story. And so today, Jones' visit serves as an antidote to the chill and the rain that we're experiencing outside. Her generosity of time, her humor, and her sage advice remains unmatched. In fact, today we sometimes fell behind schedule because she was adamant about giving each and every student her undivided attention, and there were lots of students who wanted her undivided attention. We are so incredibly lucky to have her with us tonight. And before I officially welcome Tayari Jones to the stage, I just want to say really quickly a few thank yous. Thank you to all of you who came out here tonight to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Baird Symposium. To my incredibly supportive and collaborative department for hyping me up and always checking in. To Kathy Shefflin for shepherding me through this unforgettable opportunity. And lastly, to my family, namely Carol, who encouraged me all summer as I pored over Morrison and Jones in preparation for this class. And to Lizzie, Will, Frankie, and Mac, whose love of reading inspires me to keep doing what I do. So now, please take a moment and join me in welcoming our 40th Baird Symposium author, Ms. Tayari Jones. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for that introduction, for the hospitality shown me. Thank you to all of you for the education you have provided this amazing group of young people. They're good kids, but they're good kids well taught. One thing I noticed about all the children today is they had an expectation of being listened to. They had an expectation of being taken seriously. They had confidence. They asked questions, and they listened, and they gave thoughtful answers when I put questions back toward them. These are good kids, very well taught. The time, the care, attention you have poured into them, it matters and it pays off. And just this program, I was thinking all day today, I never met a writer until I was in college. What would it have been like to have met a writer when I was a kid? And so I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to take part in this important program. And of course, I have to give extra thanks to Bill. He's amazing. He picked me up from the airport, asked me was I okay, asked me did I need some more coffee, and just the introduction you gave me to this world. I've really never spent any time in Connecticut, and you really made me feel at home here. And I just appreciate everything you do and everything all of you do. So give yourselves a round of applause right now, right now. I've been talking all day about my writing, and mostly my writing when I was a kid. And I thought that now I'll talk to you a little bit about the road that my writing took once I had already kind of established a career. As I was talking to the kids today, in my early career, there were a number of times when it looked like I wouldn't have a career anymore. Like when I was trying to get an agent for my first book, I learned an important lesson. I don't think I should have told the kids this. I'm gonna, just quick divergence, I'm gonna tell you all this story. Okay. So when I went to graduate school, I had a horrible time in graduate school. I feel like I'm in high school, but the other students were mean to me because I was accepted after the application period had closed, and there was all this talk about like how had she gotten here, and maybe I had somehow usurped their financial aid. It was all this drama. They wouldn't allow me to do a student reading. I was like Rudolph, like no reindeer games, and I found an agent. Me, the person who nobody will play with, I had an agent, and I was the most obnoxious person in the world talking about my agent. I was out on the West Coast, so it was a different time zone. I was like, oh, I really need to go. What time is it in New York? Because my agent might be calling me. And then the agent dropped me. The agent felt that I should rewrite my book as a children's book, and I wouldn't, and the agent dropped me. So here I was. I had a dark night of the soul because I was the worst, and now the agent had dropped me. And I went and I told my advisor what happened, and she said, I bet you learned a lesson, didn't you? And I was like, yes, ma'am. And she helped me find another agent, but that taught me about humility because everything could be taken away in an instant. So that was the first time when I learned how tenuous these careers are. And then as I told the students that about 10 years into my career, the rug was pulled out from under me again because computers had come into vogue, and there's a computer program called BookScan. BookScan, and because it was new, everyone was using it, they could put your name in this computer program, and it would tell the publishers whether or not you were making any money for the company. And because it was a new program, everyone was into it. They had it on their phones. So my manuscript for Silver Sparrow was being sent back unread because of my BookScan numbers. And I felt like, how can you argue with math, right? I think that's happening in the United States Congress right now. I did not have the votes. And there was nothing I could do about it. And then I had a remarkable, I'm like breezing through my life, I had a remarkable chance encounter because I was at a book event and I was out of print and I didn't have a contract, and I was very embarrassed because everyone at the book thing was so famous, and here I was done. I was completely done, but I gave my reading anyway. And after I gave my reading, a woman approached me, and she said she had heard what happened to me, and I was very embarrassed that some stranger knew. She said, "I've heard that your book is out of print. I've heard that you don't, have a contract for your next book." And I was so ashamed, but she said, "I think I can help you." I did not believe that she could help me because when you're on book tour, you meet a lot of strange people. Not y'all, but in general. I was telling Bill about the time I got kidnapped in Martha's Vineyard, but that is I'm not going to go down with that digression, but it really happened. And so this woman took my hand, and she put my hand in the hand of a publisher. And I wasn't excited because I knew the publisher had the BookScan and would just put my name in. This publisher had actually already rejected me because of the BookScan, but this woman didn't remember or whatever, and I told her what my book was about, and she asked me to send it, and I wasn't going to send it because of the BookScan. I was so embarrassed. But the woman said, "But wait, before you leave, you have to tell me, how do you know Judy?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know anyone named Judy." And she says, No, I'm talking about Judy Bloom, who just introduced us." And it was like my nerdy childhood had come to rescue me in my time of need. And I turned, and I'm not a lucky person, y'all. I've never even won a raffle. And so this happened, and I turned to tell her thank you, and she had disappeared in a puff of smoke, like a real fairy godmother. And that was on a Thursday, and by that Monday, I had a contract for my book, Silver Sparrow. And it turned out to be a very happy story. Silver Sparrow did well. It did not make me into a household name, but it kept me in the game. My hand was in the game. And after Silver Sparrow, I'm happy to report my BookScan numbers are fine. And I was given a contract for a new book, and I had to decide what I wanted to write about. And I really thought about it like, okay, this opportunity has been given to me. Why has God given me this opportunity where I can write what I want? How should I use this gift? And before, with my first 3 books, I had primarily written books about families, mostly about my family. And I did that because it was what interested me, and also because I really resisted this idea that as a Black writer, I'm supposed to write about how hard things are for my people. Like, people think that's my job to get up here and talk about that. And I just resented that. I felt like other people get to write family stories, and people think that that's serious literature. Why do I have to somehow write a novel that's kind of half sociology? Why can't I just write about my own feelings? But then it occurred to me that if I'm allowing my resistance to expectation to determine what I write, I'm still being controlled by the expectation. And there is something to be said about writing a novel that engages the issues of the day. And I had not done it, and why not? And so I wrote a grant application, and I was accepted to the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard to come and do research on the issue of incarceration. So I moved to Cambridge, and I researched incarceration. I used the Schlesinger Library, and I learned a lot about the way that this country incarcerates so many of its citizens. We're 4% of the world, but we have 16% of the world's prisoners. We have 2 million people in prison or jail at any given moment. Like 500,000 people are in jail because they don't have money for bail. So they have not been convicted of anything, and they are incarcerated. I learned that all kinds of like really horrifying things. Like I think it's like 1 in 60 kids have a parent in prison. Like, that's so many little kids. And 1 in, like, half of Americans know someone who has been to jail or prison for at least a year. It's a silent majority. It's something people don't talk about. And so being adjacent to the prison system is something that happens to so many people, but it's something that we don't talk about. And so I learned all these facts, and I was outraged, I was horrified, I was a lot of things, but I wasn't inspired. I felt like I was trying to write a book somehow, like I was trying to set statistics to music, like I was trying to somehow make art out of numbers. And it wasn't working, so just imagine the clock is ticking on my time at Harvard, and I have been working, but I have no work to show. All I had were a bunch of index cards and a really like abused-looking copy of the new Jim Crow. That's all I had to show for my work. And I didn't know what to do, so I went home to Atlanta, which is something that I do when I have things on my mind. And while I was in Atlanta, I went to the mall, because shopping is something else that I do when things are on my mind. I find it to be very soothing. And while I was there at the mall, I also went down to the food court because, you know, curly fries can help. So I was down in the food court, and I saw a young couple. They were in love, and they were in trouble. She looked fabulous. Shoes, hair, belt, lashes, you know, the whole nine. She looked great. And he looked completely okay, but she looked great. They were mismatched, but also clearly linked. And I heard her say to him, she said, "Roy, you know you wouldn't have waited on me for 7 years." I looked at him, I looked at her, they looked at me, and we were all three in complete agreement. He would not have waited on her for no 7 years. We all knew it. There was nothing really to argue about. But then he kind of pushed back from the table and looked at her and then looked at me, and he said, "I don't know what you're talking about, because this wouldn't have happened to you in the first place," which was also true. And it is my feeling that novels are born when you have people who are connected, who are in conflict, they disagree, and they are both right. And that is how I decided that I wanted to write a novel about a couple separated by a wrongful conviction. So my first impulse was to write from the point of view of the woman. I'm a woman, I'm very interested in women's lives, and so I wrote the entire novel from the point of view of Celestial. She's an artist, her career is on its way up, and her husband is arrested for this crime and put away for 12 years, and she has this conflict of how much of her life should she dedicate to her husband who's in distress, and how much of her life can she give to her own dreams? Like, do her dreams not count anymore because her husband is in prison? Is feminism only a luxury for people whose husbands are not in trouble? And in that case, then do Black women never have the luxury of feminism because there's always crisis? So I wrote this book, and I turned it in, and my editor was saying, "I think we need the husband's point of view. You know, point of view is what you do. I think you should probably write the husband's point of view." And then I got defensive and I pushed back, because let me tell you, I have a lot of friends who are men, who are writers, and I guarantee you no one has ever told them to rewrite their book from the wife's point of view. Has never happened. And so I kind of really just dug in my heels, and I was just like, no, I think this question is a problem in and of itself. But here's what I tell my students about being a writer and revision. If you are a painter and you've created a painting and you alter that painting in a revision, you can never have your original back. So you have to be very careful when you change that kind of art. As a writer, you can change anything because you still have your original draft. So the only thing keeping you from trying another angle is your ego and your pride. And so I decided to put my pride aside, and I decided that I would let's write some chapters from the point of view of Roy. He's a young executive, and this terrible thing has happened to him. And I was able to write his chapters really fast, really, really fast. It just flowed. And there are people who believe that writing a novel is like love, that when it's easy, it must be right. I do also believe that writing a novel is like love, and when it's really easy, I am very suspicious. And I realized that I was able to write Roy's story so quickly, it's because it was a story that I already knew. I had heard before. One man against the system, and he just wants to get home and find a faithful woman and a clean house, right? And that's an old story. That is the Odyssey. That is the Odyssey. And I did not want to just merely write kind of like a Black remake of the Odyssey. When you write a novel, I often think, how is this story that I'm writing adding to our shared library of stories? So just to do a remake, that's not adding anything. But I still had the chapters I had written from the point of view of Celestial. And I realized that in the Odyssey, we never hear from Penelope. And in many ways, this story is as if Odysseus had gone on his journey. And you know, if you've read the book, just like Odysseus, he makes a little pit stop on the way home, makes some friends, and still comes home with those same expectations. But that's not the point. But the point is that imagine if Odysseus had come home and Penelope not only had not unraveled her tapestries, but she's now a famous tapestry artist. And that is what happens in my story. And I felt good about it. I was doing him, I was doing her. I felt good about the back and forth. I was like, oh yeah, this is, points of view, that's what I do. This is my jam, this is my lane. However, Roy started feeling kind of boxed in. And I think he felt boxed in because everything he did was feeling representative of an experience, right? Like anytime Roy did anything, it's like I heard a voice saying, so what are you saying about the Black man today? And it's just like in real life, how if you're the only one in the room, you start to feel like you have the weight of representation of everyone on your shoulders. And that is why I decided to add the third voice of Andre, because just having two Black men in the story, neither one of them was the Black man. And they could have their personalities. They didn't have to behave as though they knew everyone was watching them. They could be themselves. And I mean, spoiler alert, it's like a love triangle situation. And so I was able to really explore both their lives, all three of their lives, and I felt good. I felt like, okay, I found this story. And I was able to write it. The book is overdue by this point. I cannot tell you the book is already like 2 years overdue. But it was 2 years overdue, but because I'm not a famous person, I wasn't really harassed about getting it in. Like, they were just like, are you gonna have it in? Because we're making a new catalog. And I would say, oh, no, I don't think so. They're like, all right, good, thanks, just let us know. Like, it was a very low pressure situation. However, the clock was ticking because I was going up for tenure and I needed another book. Well, I was 50 pages from the end and I just couldn't figure it out. It was terrible because I couldn't abandon the project. I was too invested in it, but me and the project were not getting along either. So it was almost like, me and this book, I just think I told someone this. It was like me and this book, we lived in New York and we had broken up, but we could not afford to move out. So it was just like on my couch all the time, watching TV, staying up late. It was bringing friends home. It was a nightmare, but I could not separate myself from the book. But I realized that the problem was that I was not asking myself the right questions. I was letting Roy, the character, control the book and not me, the author. Roy thinks this book is a story about who has remained faithful, who has done what to help him, because he wants to regain what he's lost. And he thinks that what he lost, he thinks he lost his job, his car, his woman, his standing, his home, all of that, which he did. But what he really lost was his understanding as a person that has something to offer in his relationships. He thinks because he's lost so much, he can only gain by being what people can give him. He forgot that he had something to give, and that is really the crime of what prison took from him. And so I realized it and I informed him. I said, Roy, you've got to do something for other people. And he resisted. He was like, no, actually, I don't. Are you aware that I was wrongfully incarcerated? I'm like, yeah, Roy, I know everything about you. But really, if you're going to move forward, you have to think about other people. And finally, Roy had to put his ego aside and allow me to revise. He was like, fine. And so I realized that when he realized that he had to set her free. He could not hold her hostage to these expectations and hostage to guilt. If he wanted to be the man he once was, he had to allow her to be the woman that she is. And so I figured it out. I finished that book. I had been stranded for a year. I finished those last 50 pages in about 2 weeks, and I could have finished it faster, but I write on typewriters, and I was out of ribbon, and it takes a while to get a new ribbon in. So I had to get a new ribbon in, and then I was able to finish the book. I was delighted. I sent it in to my editor. My editor was into it. We were really happy, but he says, I don't like your title. And that happens to me all the time. I'm not good at titles. When it comes to titles, I am like a 15-year-old girl. You know, you're 15 years old and you're writing the names of your hypothetical children, and it's like a lot of middle names, accent marks, all of that. I do the most when it comes to titles. So I knew he was like, that title is too much. I was like, it's fine, we'll change the title. And I was just being cute. I said, you know, we could call this book An American Marriage, because when you say things are American, they sound important. I said my cat, Canella, I was like, Canella is writing a memoir. It's called American Feline, and it's going to be the definitive book of what it is to be a house cat in Brooklyn today. And he said, that sounds good. I was like, no, my cat is not writing a book. And he says, no, I like the title An American Marriage. And I was like, oh, no, I was just being cute. That can't be the title. So I came up with all these other titles. He didn't like my titles. He came up with titles. I didn't like his title. And he kept saying, An American Marriage, that's the title. And I said, no. And so I went back to Atlanta, and I talked to my mentor, and I said to her, I said, they want to call this book An American Marriage. Can you believe that? And she said, I kind of like it. I was like, no, we don't like this. And she said, well, you know, why don't you like it? And I said, to me, An American Marriage sounds like a novel about some white people in Connecticut experiencing some type of emotion. And she said, well, you know, Connecticut is a very small state. So why do you think that what happens in Connecticut is more American than what happens to your characters in Atlanta? And I thought about it, and I told her I think it's because I have never been called American without another word. I've been called Black American. I've been called African American. I've traveled all over the world, and no one has ever just called me American. And so to call this story American felt like it was taking my book away from me. And she said, I see what you mean, and I get how you feel that way. She said, but you are an American. And she said, and when you think about the struggle for civil rights, that's about your citizenship and being able to claim your citizenship. And what happens to your characters could only happen in America. So this is an American marriage. She said, if you don't like it, let's say you just don't like the ring of it, or you write it down and you don't like the way it looks on paper, you don't have to take this title, she said, but don't refuse the title because you don't think you have a right to it. And I thought about what she said. And so then I went back to my editor, and I said, well, I'm coming around on the title. What if we call this an portrait of an American marriage, or story of an American marriage? I had all these other things. And he said, I think that what you're doing is that you're trying to make it smaller. He said, an American marriage sounds like a story about a big idea. And everything you're doing is to say, oh, no big ideas here. You know, he said, you're being a nice girl. He said, claim what you've done. You've worked on this book how many years? I was like, 6. He said, you worked on this for 6 years. He said, own it, own your work, own your big idea. And so I said, I feel emotional just remembering it, but I finally said to him, I said, okay. I said, let's do it. Let's call it An American Marriage. And he said, thank goodness, because we have already designed the cover. He said, I'm emailing it to you right now. And that is how we got this title and this cover. And the journey of it, I feel that I learned it was the right title because also the journey that it took me to getting there. It changed the way I understood myself and my work. And so I thought now I will read a little bit from it, and then I'll take any questions you have. I gotta put my glasses on. That's new. Okay. This is from the point of view of Celestial on the day her husband is tried for a crime she knows he didn't commit. This is going to work out, I promise. You didn't do it. I'm looking at so much time, he said. I can't ask you to throw your life away for me. His words and his eyes are speaking two different languages, like someone saying no while nodding his head yes. No one is going to throw anything away, I said. I had faith in those days. I believed in things. But what I know now is this. They didn't believe me. 12 people, and not one of them took me at my word. There in the front of the room, I explained that Roy couldn't have raped the woman in room 206 because we had been together. I told them about the magic fingers that wouldn't work, about the movie that played on the snowy television. The prosecutor asked me what we had been fighting about. Rattled, I looked to Roy and to both our mothers. Banks objected, so I didn't have to answer, but the pause made it appear that I was concealing something rotten at the pit of our very young marriage. Even before I stepped down from the witness stand, I knew that I had failed him. Maybe I wasn't appealing enough, not dramatic enough, too, not from around here. Who knows? Uncle Banks, coaching me, said, now is not the time to be articulate. Now is the time to give it up. No filter, all heart. No matter what you're asked, what you want the jury to see is why you married him. I tried, but I didn't know how to be anything other than well-spoken in front of strangers. I wish I could have brought a selection of my art, the Man Moving series, all images of Roy. I would say, this is who he is to me. Isn't he beautiful? Isn't he gentle? But all I had were words, which are light and flimsy as air. As I took my seat, not even the black lady juror would look at me. It turns out that I watched too much television. I was expecting a scientist to come and testify about DNA. I was waiting for a pair of good-looking detectives to burst into the courtroom at the last minute, whispering something urgent to the prosecutor. Everyone would see that this was a big mistake, a major misunderstanding. We would all be shaken but appeased. I fully believed that I would leave the courtroom with my husband beside me. Secure in our home, we would tell people how no black man is really safe in America. But 12 years is what they gave him. We would be 43 when he was released. Roy understood that 12 years was an eternity because he sobbed right there at the defendant's table. His knees gave way and he fell into his chair. The judge paused and demanded that Roy bear this news on his feet. He stood again and cried, not like a baby, but in a way that only a grown man can cry, from the bottom of his feet up through his torso and finally through his lips. When a man wails like that, you know it's all the tears he was never allowed to shed, from Little League disappointment to teenage heartbreak, all the way to whatever injured his spirit just last year. As Roy howled, my fingers kept worrying a rough patch of skin beneath my chin, a souvenir of scar tissue. When they did what I remember as kicking in the door, what everyone else remembers as opening it with the key, after the door was open, however it was open, we were both pulled from the bed. They dragged Roy into the parking lot, and I followed, lunging for him, wearing nothing but a white slip. Someone pushed me to the ground, and my chin hit the pavement. My slip rolled up, showing everything to everyone, and my tooth sank into the soft skin of my bottom lip. Roy was on the asphalt beside me, barely beyond my grasp, speaking words that didn't reach my ears. I don't know how long we lay there, parallel like burial plots. Husband, wife, what God has brought together, let no man tear asunder. Thank you. And now I'm happy to take whatever questions you may have. I am friendly and approachable. Yes, ma'am. That's interesting about the movie thing. I have decided that I am not the one to work on screenplays anymore. I feel like I don't understand how they work, and that's a different skill. But I think Silver Sparrow would make a good, what do you call them? They don't say mini series anymore. They have a limited series, yes. I'm showing my, yeah, I think it would make a good limited series because I feel like it's really got a lot of cliffhangers and everything like that. So I would love that. Issa Rae optioned it, but, you know, options, they're soft, like anything can happen. But I'm open to it, and I would be excited about it were it to come to fruition. But I can't spend too much time thinking about it because I feel like it keeps me from moving forward with my new work, which I am working on a new novel. I was stuck for a while. I think that I was kind of intimidated by my own success because with my other books, like I said, the books were late. Nobody really cared. It was fine. I wrote them when I wanted to write them, and I never worried about what anyone would think because nobody really thought anything. And I kind of felt like writing was a place that even though I knew it would eventually be public, it felt very private and personal in the writing. But with An American Marriage, I mean, it was published in 22 countries. So people are reading it all over the world, and it's a really different feeling to sit down to your typewriter when you're thinking it's going to be all over the world. So I've really been working hard at I want to be the person I was when I wrote my first book. You know, just an innocent person hearing only the story. And I feel like I had to do a lot of soul searching to get back there. Yes. I have 6 typewriters in my office. I have about 20 typewriters total. They all of them work except for one because I like them to be functional. It's something about having a typewriter that I feel like you can jinx yourself by having typewriters around that don't work because it becomes more about performing the idea of being a writer than actually writing. I just have a big desk. I like a desk where I can stack up a lot of papers. And I have bookcases around, and my friend Jacqueline Woodson told me that you should always have your awards in your writing room, but they should be behind you so you're not looking at them when you're trying to write. Yes, sir. Well, I thank you for that. You know, when I'm writing them, I don't know what's going to happen, and so I'm on edge too. I feel like if I knew where the story was going, you would feel me aiming for it, but I don't know either, and I am frequently shocked. Like when Roy found out who his father was, Roy thought he was surprised. I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, "Get out! What?" But then it made sense. And so I think because I'm feeling that, I'm able to transfer that to the page, I think. So thank you. Yes, ma'am. Well, I wanted to do my own audiobook. They would not let me. And these people, they think they're slick, but see, what they don't know, I'm a person that reads the email all the way to the bottom. When I get an email, I'm so nosy, I will go all the way through. And you know, they had been bouncing this email back amongst themselves, and then they started including me, and they forgot that and on the bottom it was like, oh my God, please keep her from auditioning. Yeah, they hate it. And finally they were like, okay, let's just go through the motions. But so what I did, I realized I wasn't going to be able to do my own audiobook, but I had some ideas about who I thought should do it because it's a really good job for an actor. Think about it. You can do the audiobook and no one's going to refuse you the role because they don't think you look the part or, you know, just a lot of things. You know, they may think you're too old or too this or too that. And if you live in New York, they record them in Newark, New Jersey. So if you have kids, you can take the role. It's good money. So I just decided who I thought would be good at it and who could benefit from that gig, since obviously they weren't going to let me do it. And I think they did a really good job. And I understand why they don't like the author to do it. Most of the time when the author does her own audiobook, it's a memoir. It's very seldom a novel. Because they don't think you can do voices, and they also correctly think you will not take direction. Because I wouldn't. I wish they would tell me, oh, I think this character is this way. I'm like, oh, do you? You think so? So I understand that. I think the audiobook is, because it is performative, the actors do interpret the book, and they do take direction. And so I think it removes some imagination from the reader, but I don't think that it's enough of an intervention that it doesn't count as reading. I listen to audiobooks too. Yes. None of them. That's how I know the book is over. When I don't, like, there have been times when I thought a book was over, but I woke up still thinking about the people, which meant I knew the book wasn't over. But once it's over, I do feel like it is gone, which is also probably why, when it comes to the idea of making it into a film or other forms, it's really hard for me to think about, because I feel like my story is done. And I also, another reason why I don't think I'll ever write a sequel is that to be at the center of a book, you have to have some huge problem. And I like to think that I leave all the people in a place where they don't have a book-worthy problem anymore. They're good. They're doing their thing.
Can you share some of the titles you were thinking?
It's too embarrassing. It is really too embarrassing when I look back. I can't believe sometimes I look in my computer, I have them saved under these different names. I'm so embarrassed. It's kind of like looking at the pictures of yourself when you were 14. You thought you looked so good. But that hairstyle is so embarrassing. Promises, promises. Yes. It depends. If you tell me what you like to read, I can tell you who you should read. What are you into? Oh, like on the computer, it's like people who read this book also read that book. Right now, I'm on a real kick. I want to read every book that Louise Erdrich has ever written. I think now that Toni Morrison is no longer with us, I think that Louise Erdrich is the Dean of American Letters. She isn't thought of that way. I think that too often she is people think of her in a certain niche, I think because of geography and ethnicity, but I really think she's the one. I think she's the one. I was just the universe, these big universes that she creates in a novel. And she writes a book like every other year, and they're good. I can't get enough. So I'm going to say we should all read you could not do her for a symposium, though. Too many books. But she's amazing. Yes. Oh, my Christmas trees. I'm telling you, I put up 5 trees this year. I think decoration, I really love beauty. It makes me happy to see things that are beautiful and also to read things that are beautiful. And I like finding beauty unexpectedly. It's always such a thrill when you see or encounter something amazing. Like this is something I do. In the springtime, I go to the hardware store and I buy wildflower seeds. And when I walk in and I see something ugly, I throw a handful of the seeds out. And then when I come back a few months later, there are flowers there. And I'm like, I did that. It pleases me.
Probably have time for one more question. Anyone else?
Yes.
You're speaking to a room full of medical teachers, so I'm just curious to hear some of your thoughts about teaching and the role of teaching English to high school kids. Like, what do you think that should do?
I think that English, well, obviously I was an English major. and my English teachers. I went to a math and science high school, a place where I was very unhappy. I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at science. My mama had me in the band. I wasn't good at music. I spent a lot of time as a young person doing things that I wasn't good at. And I didn't feel good about myself because I didn't have that experience of being good at something. And I had an English teacher who was nice to me. And she recommended that I write a story for a contest. It was a citywide contest. And I wrote a story, and she helped me type it and everything. And we sent it off, and I won. I won, and it was a letter that came in the mail. It said, "Congratulations, you have been selected." And I gave a reading. I didn't even know that writers gave readings because I had never really thought about where books come from. And she came with me and my parents, and she had her children, and they were all dressed up. They had big ribbons in their hair. It was such a big event. And she and I still exchange, Christmas cards to this day. And I think that, of course, she helped me because I am a writer, but it wasn't the fact that I grew up to be a writer that mattered. It was that she saw me, even if I had not won, the fact that she asked me to apply meant she saw something in me, and I felt like I was doing something meaningful. And that was what I really think that was missing in my life. Not even that I wasn't doing things that I was good at. I wasn't doing things that I believed was meaningful. And I believe that literature is meaningful, and it's meaningful to everyone in a way that math just is not. Math is important, but it's not meaningful. And so I think that teachers of English, you're teaching children empathy. You're teaching them critical thinking. You're teaching them something about beauty. And you're also teaching them something very important about patience. It takes time. You have to take the time to read a book, to think about it. And there's so many important things, particularly right now when they're in this digital age, to get a young person to slow down and do what you have to do to read a book is really showing them the way that they will be in the world as adults. Wait, I have one more thing. I have one more thing to say. I have something I have to say. This is important. This is important. Particularly for us as grown people, because young people say to me, "What advice do you give to young writers?" But there is also advice that I want to give because I believe that there are people in this room who have stories they want to tell, stories they want to write. And I think a lot of times that there are the things that you think are keeping you from writing, like your job, your kids, your responsibilities, maybe you're doing elder care, all these things. These are the things that are going to make what you write more important and more meaningful. I don't want to read a book by someone who doesn't have anything to do but sit around and write a book. I don't want to read a book about your couch. I want to read a book about people's rich, complex lives. And that's what you're out doing. So the things about your life that you think are detriment to your work, that's your superpower. And there's someone else living a life similar to the one you're leading, and they've never read about it. And so there's someone out there who needs what it is that you have to say. And because you're busy, you can't write your book as quickly as someone else. But keep this in mind. A page a day is a book in a year. A page every other day is a book in 2 years. It's just about being consistent and sticking with it. But it's important. So I really implore you, if you have a story that needs telling, please tell it because someone out there needs it and is waiting for it every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tayari. I think you all got a little bit of a picture there of what our students experienced today. And I tell you, it was something special. I want to thank you first for something totally outside of your sage advice and your inspiration to all of us, for the fact that you flew in here yesterday afternoon, I think, and have been going nonstop with Kingswood Oxford students and faculty and the community, from last night's dinner, from early this morning to, what are we at, 9:15 tonight, always being on and always being so gracious with your time, as Bill said, answering question after question.
it really says so much about you. And so I just want to thank you for giving so much of yourself over the last 24 hours. I want to acknowledge Warren Baird and this symposium. And I've been here for 5 years. And I've been at 5 different independent schools, and never have I seen a program at any school that is as special as this one here. And I think all of us here can understand why, but for our kids to have access to someone like this, someone with this kind of talent, with this kind of advice to them, is so meaningful and so special. And it truly makes a difference. And so I want to thank you also, and I'm going to add Bill to this too, for helping to transform the lives of those kids in this class, in both of those classes. I know how meaningful it was for them as well. So thank you for making such a difference in the lives of these kids. Warren Baird had a pretty simple but bold idea about bringing a renowned author to campus. And I guess he had a connection with E.L. Doctorow or something to get this thing started back in the day, 40 years ago. But look at what it has become ever since then. And we're just so honored and so privileged that you were able to come and join us for this. We have a tradition at our school where we don't write a gift or send some flowers, but we try to think about the way that you spend time and effort into your novels and your books, and we want to give back in a similar way. And as you hopefully have seen, we have some pretty talented people here. And though it's not from the written word, it's another expression of art. And every year we ask one of our artists to work on something that would represent this author and the author's work. And so this year, the very talented Katie Burnett, our amazing art teacher, has been working on something as a farewell gift to you, Tayari. And so I'm going to ask Katie to come up next and share with you a little bit about what she has worked on. Katie?
Okay. I've been at KO for 10 years, and this is the first time that I have stood at this podium, because I'm a visual artist and not performing. All right, so each year, an artist in the Creative Arts Department gets to take part in creating a print for the visiting artists, and this is no small feat. And it comes with anxiety and preparation. I can say that I definitely feel vulnerable up here getting ready to share my interpretation of Miss Jones' work and hope that she connects with what I have made for her. Also, this process comes with beauty and hope and creativity and meaning as an artist spins together a kaleidoscope of work that we hope that you connect with. The biggest part for me, which Bill knows, is that while I was absorbing all that I could about the characters in Miss Jones' book, An American Marriage, I was also commuting to my job that I've done for the last couple summers to a high security prison to teach art each day. I wondered about my students' stories and could easily Google them, but did not, because who wants to be known for their worst day in their lives? Instead, while in my classroom at the Cheshire Men's High Security Prison, with my students behind barbed wire, a maze of cold cells, drab surroundings, security guards, battle alarms, and pain, there was hope, and there was art, and there was color. My students connected with what felt like an alternative universe where everyone felt seen. We painted landscapes, we drew flowers, we talked about art, and we discussed the many books that they were reading at the time, one of which happened to be An American Marriage. It was a beautiful thing to be able to talk about the imagery for this print with my students that felt so deeply connected to Miss Jones' work. After many iterations of this print, I hope that you like what I came up with as much as I do. My students and I felt very connected to what we created for this print, and they had a lot of input on this. While running one morning with my daughter Gwyneth, who is in the front row, we found a hickory tree. We searched for many weeks for a hickory tree in Connecticut to take like a photograph of, and I took many photographs of hickory trees in Connecticut to find the best one for this print. And this is what we found. And my students at the Cheshire prison felt that the hickory tree was very important to commemorate this visit. And because of what this tree, we felt witnessed in your book. We felt that the hickory tree witnessed all of these scenes and things that happened over time and how important it was to those characters. Roy, Celestial, Andre, the picket fence that I have in the print is a reference to the American Dream, and I used the font from the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you, Gwyneth, for suggesting that. Before we unveil the print, I need to say that I would like to say thank you to Bill for insisting that I read this book, knowing that I would be something that it is so important for me to be a part of. Ms. Jones, thank you for shedding light on the circumstance and resilience of the American spirit. I would also like to thank Scott McDonald and Greg Scranton for all of their technical help in putting this print together, because I certainly needed them. And I feel like this is the point where I'm like, and I hope you like it. Okay.
Katie, that's fantastic. Everyone is welcome to come and take a look at this. Tayari, there's one of these for you that you will take with you, or we will ship to you. Ship it, yeah, a little easier, right? And one that will be hung on the walls here next to the other Warren Baird authors' art representations. So, Katie, it's absolutely fantastic. So. And I think that officially ends the 2022-23 Warren Baird Symposium. So thank you. Katie, it'd be great to get a picture with you.